Hey, everybody. It's your host, Brian Hunt, once again, and welcome to another live LinkedIn event of Risk On, Risk Off. And today we're going to talk about a topic that I think that everybody is probably pretty tired here, especially in the Southwest. That's the concept of heat. The word heat dome, I'm sure everybody's heard quite a bit. You're probably getting tired of it. It's been a hot one, especially here in Texas. It's not as bad as 1980 when I lived here. It was like 45 days straight of complete misery, but it's been pretty miserable here the past 45 days, and we still have a heat dome sitting over us. We're looking at maybe all next week, still 100-degree temperatures. Now, let's talk about that. Heat, working outdoors. Many of us probably sitting our watches have the benefit of being able to work indoors. I've got a nice air-conditioned office here in Dallas, and I'm not having to work outside. But there are a lot of industries, a lot of occupations that people don't have the luxury of being inside all the time. They got to be outside. And specifically, one of those is construction. And when you've got not only heat, but also maybe humidity, it just makes for pretty oppressive, hazardous working environments. Obviously, a lot of general contractors are used to that. So you maybe start early in the day, you try to get done by 3, but still 3 o'clock, it's still 100 degrees. It's still 100 degrees. And a lot of that comes with issues respects to making sure you're properly hydrated, and also just making sure that you're providing health and safety protocols that your people are being taken care of. And unfortunately, especially with climate change, and this seems to be the upward trend, the arrows going up and to the right, respects to global temperatures and regional temperatures, this peril is not going to go away anytime soon. So the question is, what can individuals do and firms to try to mitigate that exposure and ensuring that they're staying on top of things and providing the best possible health and safety for their client, for their employees, but also what can they do to maybe monitor, predict it before something goes wrong, and make sure they're kind of doing the best they possibly can to eliminate that exposure to their employees. Well, not too long ago, I was sitting reading an article in the Dallas Morning News, and I came across an article that really kind of caught my interest, especially from a risk management perspective. And that was a sort of a pilot program that was being done by a very large general contractor here that's based in Dallas called Rogers O'Brien, that had a job site when they were using software from a third party, not just software, but actually telemetric devices that was tracking an employee's body temperature and biometric data points. And the whole point of that is that information is being collected and monitored and providing real-time analysis to the management of Roger O'Brien, superintendents and project managers, health and safety, to make sure that employees are not getting heat stroke or looking at signs of potential heat stroke. So it's very much taking technology to try to adapt and provide solutions to bring to the table to help firms and employees and companies, reduce that overall exposure. And as we say, it doesn't seem like it's getting cooler around here if it's only getting hotter. And then everybody in the planet's moving to the Southwest, especially here in Dallas and the triangle from Dallas to Austin, Houston, Rapids, San Antonio. It's playing projects and it's still getting hot. So what are you going to do? And that's where I'm very excited the opportunity to have the individual who's responsible for the technology on that Roger O'Brien project. And his name is Mr. Zach Kiehl. Zach, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Brian. It's a pleasure to be here.
No, it's a pleasure to be here. And I mean, obviously you and I reached out to you when I first saw that article. And I go, man, this is really the kind of thing that really the themes goes in well with this show. We talk a lot about risk with a heavy concentration in construction and real estate development. And go, man, this is definitely something I wanted to bring to the attention. But Zach, before we get way into the weeds about what you guys are doing, let's give a little background first. First question, Zach, I like to ask is kind of like the take on the old game. Where in the world is Carmen Sandiego? So where in the world is Zach today?
Yeah. So I am based in Dayton, Ohio, near Wright-Patterson Air Force Base.
Okay.
Yep.
And are you from there? Born and raised, or where'd you grow up?
Kind of, sort of. So
Okay.
I'm born and raised in the Midwest and Ohio region. So I've traversed all sorts of spots within Ohio. Spent some time in Indiana as well. But mostly a Midwestern through and through.
Very good. And so, Zach, tell me about, you got a very distinguished background in education. So let's kind of maybe you can summarize, where'd you go to undergrad and how'd you get decided to start studying that as a
Sure. Yeah. For as long as I can remember, I've been very interested in this intersection of people and technology and the use of those for good.
Okay.
So I remember when I was probably 5, 6, 7-year-old wanting to be a doctor. Ultimately, I really started enjoying math, kind of STEM. And then as a junior in high school, I wrote a paper about why I wanted to be a biomedical engineer. The
All
field
right.
of biomedical engineering
Yeah.
is pretty new, right? But
Yeah.
it generally focuses on trying to take new technologies, innovations, developments, et cetera, to ultimately, improve the lives of those at risk, whether those are battling chronic conditions, occupational safety, MRIs. The amount of inventions that have come out of that field are remarkable. So
Sure.
I didn't change my major like a lot of folks that change multiple times. I wrote that paper. I went and got 2 degrees in biomedical engineering for undergrad and grad school, and then I ended up getting an MBA from the Kelley School of Business at Indiana University. So that really kind of ignited some of my interest in the entrepreneurship side. So I like to say biomedical engineer turned technology entrepreneur.
Nice. Well, Zach, I could say I'm in the same camp as you. I studied accounting in high school. I liked it. It's what it clicked, and I studied it in college. I graduated my bachelor's in accounting. So you and I are part of a small crew, I guess, as far as club, as far as you stuck with what you started in college. But good for you.
That's right.
So obviously, as you graduate, you're a biomedical engineer. Kind of talk about your career. Now, obviously, you first started off like actually you interned at National Oil of Varco, which I know very well down in Houston. So walk us through your career.
Yeah, so I started at NOV in their quality engineering department. Ultimately wanted something that was a little bit more focused kind of on the human element. Ended up having some internships and some graduate research positions, generally with defense contractors. So naturally, the Department of Defense exposes humans to all sorts of challenging environments, and they're very much trying to make super soldiers and generally get more out of their people without breaking them long term, which is an immense challenge. And I was fortunate enough coming out of on my master's in biomedical engineering to work in an organization known as Aptima. They're a human-centered engineering company. So I think the coolest way my job had ever been described to me by someone else was that I was like Q for James Bond. And
nice.
It sounds kind of funny, but
the
more I thought about it, I spent a lot of time developing interesting solutions and projects and technologies, worked on exoskeletons and shirts with sensors built into them and all sorts of interesting projects. So that ultimately led to a program that we received quite a bit of funding focused on confined space monitoring. So since this group generally probably understands what a confined space, I won't go into the weeds there, but we had this idea of taking wearable sensor technologies that were generally being used, within the labs of groups like Air Force Research Laboratory and DARPA and some of those types of agencies, and really transitioned it into the field. And once we started that program, we had some press and publicity, and we ultimately had a lot of commercial clients starting to reach out and say, hey, I've got people in risk-laden environments, whether it's confined spaces, lone workers, heat stress, et cetera. And we saw this need for this idea that, there are 32 million workers that work outdoors. There are 2 million people that enter confined spaces annually, and I believe the number is 53 million lone workers throughout North America and Europe combined. And there are just millions upon millions of people that, as you said, aren't so fortunate to sit in front of a screen for a majority of the day, or maybe they're more fortunate than us in some ways.
True.
You got to watch the calories, right, when we're sitting behind the desk. But we saw an opportunity. We ended up raising a couple $1 million of investment capital in our seed round. And I was so fortunate to be able to go lead that company as the principal founder with a great co-founder of mine. And we've been growing since.
Good. So tell us a little about what the business purpose or the VigiLife. What is sort of the inspiration of starting that firm?
Yeah, absolutely. So the term VigiLife is really a portmanteau of the words vigilant and life. And that's really what we try to do, is stay vigilant over what matters most, human life. And as I like to say to any organization that we're talking to, you ask them what's their most important asset, and a large majority of the time they say their people, right? So protecting their people is truly what matters most. And our mission at VigiLife is to protect and enrich the lives of those at risk. And we do that primarily through modern, secure, and scalable technologies, to include wearables, to include intuitive software, to include some ideas that we haven't even cooked up yet. But we really think there's that nexus of people and technology for personalized health and safety.
Great. So before we next question, I want to let everybody know, everybody's watching, if you have a question for Zach, please go ahead and look at the bottom right-hand corner where you're watching on LinkedIn. There's an add a comment, and you see my picture next to it. Go ahead and type in your comment and press enter, and it's going to come to me. And then as long as you keep it clean and appropriate, I'll bring it up there on the screen so Zach can see it. So Zach, let's talk about, obviously what you're doing is very similar in respects to what we're seeing in other parts of, say, the insurance world. trying to use leverage technology to try to prevent or reduce a risk. And like as an example, very common these days, especially in commercial auto insurance, you want to see telemetrics, little doggles you have underneath the steering wheel you plug in, that allows companies to track where cars are, how fast you're driving, hard braking, whether or not the drivers are being defensive drivers or aggressive drivers. And obviously that helps sort of, if you can identify problems, nip it in the bud before it becomes an actual claim and therefore a lawsuit. So when I heard this and I saw this, it just made a lot of sense. And when you see this, it's a technology. And maybe I don't want to give it away, but let's talk about in this situation. It's a public record. So let's talk about the device that you're using in conjunction with Rogers O'Brien on that project. Can you maybe walk us through specifically what that is and what it does and how it benefits?
Sure. So we have a couple different sensors that are deployed to Rogers O'Brien right now. So there's a sensor that is kind of a wet bulb globe temperature sensor in your pocket that we've deployed that can get ambient data. So we can pull data on the environment and look at like the weather forecast like we all can with our smartphones. But sometimes it's very important to get the data specifically on that job site where we're looking at wind speed and direct sunlight, those types of things. So we have one sensor there that's just focused on the environment. And then we also have some wearable sensors. So there's two types we're currently working with, and neither of them are actually produced by VigiLife, believe it or not. Part of our vision is to leverage what's already out there, right? I know there's, I think, 100 million deployed Apple Watches throughout the world, right? As opposed to making yet another sensor that's why not leverage what's out there? So we've formulated great partnerships with organizations like Apple and Garmin and Polar and a lot of the leaders in this space. So specifically, some of the workers are wearing a Polar sensor that can be worn on the forearm or the bicep primarily. It's just a little what's called a PPG or photoplethysmography sensor. It's a fancy word for basically using light to detect your heart rate. So it's an optical heart rate sensor. And then we also have some workers wearing a Garmin smartwatch, just a fairly low cost, high feature, very durable, long battery life Garmin smartwatch, and using those in concert with some algorithms and our intuitive software to provide that real-time second-by-second oversight.
Okay. So you're not manufacturing anything, you're just leveraging what's out there available, correct?
Correct. Not yet, at least.
Not yet. All right. Okay. All right. That's very good. So maybe walk us through, so you're leveraging an Apple Watch, Garmin. So what is the data? And I know you collect data, but I think also there's an AI component as far as what is it you're looking for and how is it being monitored? How do people get notified? What's sort of that process?
Sure. So basically, the sensor has an ability to collect what we call relatively raw data, so you can get some raw signals. And then it actually depends on the sensors. Some sensors with the firmware, they may have algorithms actually embedded within the device and may, for instance, take in a raw PPG signal and then spit out a measure like heart rate or pulse rate. So it depends on the type of sensor, but a lot of the algorithms are either on the device or run at the edge. And in this case, that means on a mobile gateway. So the way Safeguard currently works is it communicates from sensor to a gateway, which a lot of times is a cell phone, could be a tablet. There are some other types of gateways that could potentially work for this platform. And then, so a lot of our analytics are done at the edge. And the use case there is we wouldn't want to be so reliant on the cloud that the moment that someone loses connectivity that they can't receive an alert, or that the algorithm to estimate core body temperature only works if it's in the cloud. So most of our algorithms and kind of advanced analytics really live at that, what we call the operational edge. And then we only really ping the cloud or push the data to the cloud for that remote telemetry aspect. So a lot of times, the job site safety supervisor may be on the job, but there could be use cases where they have distributed workers. And I think one of my favorite stories is I've monitored the heart rates of Special Forces teams fast roping from a helicopter in my basement in Dayton, Ohio, while they were off the coast of California. So second by second telemetry, pushing data from device to edge to cloud back down to edge for that user to consume and to make decisions on.
Good. So obviously, one of the things that we talk about here is, I work with my clients, but trying to inform people who watch is the concept of risk. And one thing we've had prior episodes of not only here, but also my 60 Seconds of Risk show is, cyber security and, data vulnerability. So obviously you're collecting data on individuals. And I'm sure that one of the first people are going to ask you, or maybe your clients even talk to you about, okay, so how secure is your data? What is my exposure that my employees' information is going to get divulge. Can you maybe walk us through that?
Absolutely. So I'm definitely not going to sit here and say that our system is, unpenetrable, because I think there have been multiple case studies of organizations that say that, and time will tell. But what I will say is that our origins are with the Department of Defense, and
Okay.
we have some clients working with some very, challenging environments from the standpoint of cybersecurity and privacy. So as opposed to a lot of companies, especially startups, if you will, that really just try to develop a useful solution. And I'm not going to say they cut corners, but generally they may not prioritize things like, leading enterprise grade cybersecurity, right? It's like, hey, can we make the next TikTok or the next app that's going to blow up that people enjoy? And then as we get more users, more revenues, more investment capital, we can shore up our back end architecture. But we really flip that model on its head. We recognize that the data that we're collecting could be perceived as personal data or very sensitive data. So from the ground up, from day one, one of our core tenets was industry leading privacy and security. And I say that together, privacy and security, because they go hand in hand, but they are very different things at times.
Yeah.
But that has been a core focus of our technology. We're actually in the process of pursuing something called a FedRAMP certification with the government, which I would expect not very many people to know what that is offhand, but
I don't.
it is one of the most difficult cybersecurity certifications to get, that requires continuous evaluation, that if we're successful, even have a pathway to potentially host classified data. So generally speaking, we've developed that from the ground up, and I would say that that's one of our competitive advantages, is really focusing on that enterprise security and privacy.
Awesome. That's fantastic. Okay, so you've taken one concern maybe off the table people might be listening to.
We've tried to.
Yeah, right. So then let's talk about, if you can, whether it be in the field of construction or the other industries that you've worked on. Can you give us some examples of how this thing worked beneficially, and actually you were able to detect something before it went wrong?
Sure. So I don't want to bury the lead here, so I'll just say we've saved a life. Going back all the way, I talked about junior and high school, wanted to develop technology to help people. And for me, the rest of the company could go to a train wreck. At the end of the day, we got someone home safely that otherwise wouldn't have. It was in a confined space use case, and I won't go into the details to divulge company information.
No, that's fine.
Specifically, our system was able to provide an alert and provide a recommendation for someone to be checked on that the standby safety attendant was not seen. So again, humans are fallible creatures, and in this specific instance, they weren't able to see an incident that Safeguard was. So in that specific environment, we've saved a life. We've also had some successes, with heat stress. I know we've even seen some behavior change. I think there's been a story or two of some individuals that have started to recognize that maybe it's not great to pound a bunch of sugary energy drinks before I go work outside in the 100-degree heat.
What?
And that sounds silly. Yeah, right. It sounds silly, but once people actually are faced with the data and they can see that stark change in their body and their response, their physiological response, it can lead to behavior change. I mean, there's a lot of literature that's showing just tracking step count and presenting that to the user will actually lead to positive behavior modification, right? They take more steps. So just this concept of making sure the data we collect is accessible to the user, again, from that privacy standpoint, the moment you just tell someone to shut up and wear this black box on their arm, you're going to lose all credibility. Big brother concerns are going to pop up, and rightfully so. So for us, we really try to empower our users to better understand their body and their data. So from saving a life to behavior changes and everything in between, we've had quite a few successes, and of course, we've also had some challenges.
Okay, no, fair enough. So I'm curious. So, and again, anybody who's sitting here watching this, you have a question for Zach, please go ahead and type your question down in the bottom right-hand corner where it's next to my picture. So it says add a comment. We'd love to bring it to Zach's attention. So Zach, one thing from my perspective is when I talk to clients and I talk to underwriters or carriers, there's if I go into the details from an insurance perspective, we're still very much, many years into what we call the hard insurance market, where you're seeing insurance rates across the lines still increasing. And I'm talking not about health and benefits. I'm talking about, even those are expensive. I'm talking about property and casualty, and specifically, general liability, workers' compensation. Do you have you had conversations, or are you engaged with conversations with large carriers that want to understand, what your solution could do to help mitigate a risk, therefore provide underwriters more comfort, underwriting a client, or even helping, it might be preferred vendor with insurance carriers so that they can bring a discount to the table for their clients?
Yeah, that's a great question. And what I would say is I would characterize it that some of these large insurers or payers are very intrigued. I
Okay.
think the insurance industry by definition is avoids risk. So when you
Mhm.
avoid risk, innovation sometimes can be very difficult. But
Yeah.
I do think they're keeping a very close eye, and we have had some conversations with some very innovative organizations because this isn't a new model as you described, like the model of plug something into your car to get an insurance discount, get your blood drawn and share your data with your employer to get a premium reduction, install a smoke alarm in your home to get a decrease off your premium. It
Yeah.
is relatively, as you said, a straightforward model, but as it pertains to things like wearable sensors on the job, where does the risk sit? Does it sit with the employer? Does it sit with us? Does it sit with the insurance company? So these are active dialogues that a lot of our early adopters are engaging, whether they're self-insured or with some of their insurers. So we have not struck a formal partnership with any of the large companies yet. I would say if anyone's out there and listening, we are more than happy to have that conversation because I think there are a three-legged stool here. You have users that have to buy in and have some sort of incentive.
Hmm.
You have employers that generally want to take care of their people and do it as cost effectively as possible. And then you have insurance companies, which are absorbing that risk and God forbid, any sort of
Yeah.
catastrophic claims, which we all want to avoid. So I think there's a win-win-win opportunity. I would say we're kind of the fourth leg of the stool that's out there of it. Yeah, obviously, if people are using our technology, then we're happy and we're succeeding. But I think the three of those, assuming that give-get relationship where they're giving up something in exchange for something that they value, I think this could be a very virtuous cycle as we look to deploy to more industries and really grow our user base.
No, I think you're spot on in the sense that, at least my perspective, where I sit in the insurance world, I think what you're providing here is definitely be well received in the sense that we're like, say, for me, property insurance, in specifically called builder's risk during the course of construction. Water damage can be a big thing, and so there are firms out there that are providing water sensors, and
Mhm.
some carriers want to see that, or you get a discount if you use it. There's like another one. I have a client that provides 24/7 video monitoring on job sites, and that they're a preferred vendor on one particular builder's risk underwriter. So it's like you can't get a quote unless you have them, and so what we're seeing, especially in the automotive field, like we talked about telemetrics on the doggle, but even to the point you're starting to have cameras installed, either not only pointing forward but into the cab to see if anything goes wrong, with video documentation to prove who did what. I can easily see that what your firm is doing as a solution, enabling technology to therefore eliminate or reduce the risk, will be very well received amongst carriers. So I would encourage you to have those conversations and down the road, because I think it's definitely a service that we provided, be well received. Now, obviously, we're talking here about construction. Can you also, without going into much details or how many time you want, what sort of other solutions you provide for other industries?
Sure. So some of the use cases that Safeguard could be used for, and again, we really focused on enterprise flexibility because there are other connected kind of safety technologies out there, whether it's for gas detection or for ergonomics. Like again, there's a lot of risk. There's a very diverse set of exposures and toxicants and stressors in an occupational environment, especially in organizations, in the construction industry, oil and gas, et cetera. So we have really tried to be that centralized platform, or as some clients have called it, that single pane of glass. That there are a lot of great sensors out there, and part of the reason that we've taken this open architecture approach is that, hey, I'm not going to be able to compete with Apple to make a better smartwatch, right? I'm not going to be able to make a better gas detector than fill in the blank gas detector company, right? And
Mm-hmm.
the idea here is that we will focus on what we're good at, which is building intuitive software that provides that real-time telemetry and monitoring of physiological and environmental data, and allow sensor manufacturers to focus on what they do well. So some other use cases include noise dosimetry or industrial hygiene, whether that's noise, chemical exposure,
Okay.
ergonomics, lone worker applications is one of our biggest applications. Again, there's a lot of people, maybe they don't think they're a lone worker, but as I always like to say, it's like, hey, if you passed out on your job,
Mm-hmm.
would anyone find you within a couple minutes? And if the answer is no, then you are effectively a lone worker. So between
Okay.
lone workers, heat stress, industrial hygiene, duty to care applications, I guess we're expanding our influence, but thus far our beachhead focus has really been in that kind of lone worker and heat stress use case.
Like in that situation, lone work, I'm assuming, like, not only monitoring the individual's vitals, if it drops over a certain level or you get a notice, that you're able to pinpoint them as far as a GPS location, as far as where they actually are.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And
Okay.
I think every founder of a company has some personal stories here, and I won't go into too much in the way of specifics, but I've had
Yeah.
several close friends and mentors. A few of them fortunately were saved, and a few of them not.
Mhm.
One specific environment, somebody passing out after hours because they were, potentially a diabetic and battling blood sugar issues, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Fortunately, someone was there at the right time and place. But those are those types of opportunities where a wearable tied with this telemetry solution and intelligent guardian software could basically proactively alert emergency services of where the person's at, how they're doing, and track them in real time until appropriate medical care is received. So yeah.
Right. So again, if anybody's just joining the conversation, if you have a question you want to post to Zach, please go ahead and type it in the bottom right-hand corner where you see my picture. It says next, add a comment. Please type in your comment there and press enter, and I'll bring it up here, and I'll bring it to Zach's attention. So Zach, I mean, just kind of curious. I mean, how long has the firm been around now?
So we founded the company in March of 2020, which
Okay.
for those of you that remember back then, I know it seems like an eternity ago. That was right as this COVID thing was starting up. So not sure if that was a great idea or a terrible idea, but it was a decision that was made. So
Yeah.
I guess when there are challenges, there are also opportunity. So we
True.
founded in March of 2020. I went full time once we had pulled together some investment capital at the beginning of 2021. So we've been at it for a little over 3 years. So I'd like to say we've kind of somewhat graduated from that early stage startup company that's just trying to figure out the
Mm-hmm.
market. We have a product that is in use, that we have paid clients, but we're certainly trying to expand our features, our partnerships, et cetera, and really just find others that are as passionate and about our mission and vision as we are.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that. There's a gentleman here I know, got to know very well, consumer friend, and we both used to work at Austin Industries at the same time, but I didn't know him then. I mean, he actually went off and started him and his partner started a general contractor firm, and they did it about 6 weeks before the pandemic broke out. And I was talking to him soon after. He goes like, "I didn't have a pandemic break out in my business model when I decided to start this firm." So Zach, I applaud you for if you were able to survive, start your firm in the midst of the pandemic. I think you might have a pretty good future in front of you.
Well, thank
So
you.
what is
Yeah,
yeah?
go ahead.
So what is the future for your firm, and what are the potential solutions we see coming down the road?
Yeah, so I would think it would be the continued expansion of some of these initial use cases that we focused
Mhm.
on, and providing additional features that provide utility both towards enterprises to really use the data to make proactive insights and decisions to take better care of their people, but also for users to make sure that there's that continual kind of stickiness, that they're getting value from the use of the platform as well. I think you'll see some continued partnerships to expand our reach. Fundamentally, we are a technology company. We are not an insurance company.
Mhm.
We're not a wireless carrier. So there are a lot of partnerships that we're planning to pursue that could potentially open up new opportunities and new avenues. On the sensor side, we're continuing to have partnerships with leading sensor innovators. I did give a little bit of a tease there that there are some interesting kind of research programs that we're working with on various government and academic partners of maybe even trying to put out some new form factors on the sensing side, because for our vision really at VigiLife is to democratize this idea of human sensing. I know there are so many workers throughout the world. There's actually been some recent research coming out looking at if we focus on heat stress and the topic of this conversation, we are all
Mhm.
aware of the acute challenge of football players or construction workers, unfortunately, passing out and often dying.
Mhm.
But there's a lot of research even starting to look at the longitudinal effects of cumulative exposure of exertional heat stress, and looking at things like chronic kidney disease. So there are a lot of folks kind of in the Mesoamerican regions, sugarcane workers and the like, that are
Mhm.
developing chronic kidney disease in their 30s and 40s. But one of the primary obstacles there is cost, right? The moment
Yeah.
that a system, you got to buy a fancy Apple Watch and some software, sometimes it can just be too difficult for some of these enterprises to deploy solutions at scale. So additional features, doubling down on privacy and security, partnerships, expansion to new markets. That's really our goal. We really want to think that this technology can be applicable to millions upon millions of users.
Well, you brought it to my attention first, Mary. Thank you for the comment. So you made a comment, and I'm curious. Having played football and having lived in this town, it's pretty hot, and I feel bad for these high schoolers who are out there working at 6 in the morning, go and practice and stuff. Is there a service that you guys provide as far as you mentioned professional athletes? Is there, like, whether it be a shirt or whatever? Like, are you working with professionals, like, whether it be colleges, high schools, the pros as far as helping, is that a service you do provide?
So yes and no, I would say. I would say that on the no side, it has not been our core market and our core focus today. We've really been
Sure.
focused on, again, construction industry, some of those that are required to work outside
Yeah.
continuously. But what I will say is, yes, we have done some work with some athletic teams.
Okay.
There does appear to be a very germane need for this technology. Specifically, I think I saw an article last year where there was a fatality at a high school level. So this is high school,
Yeah.
and I think it was an $8 million settlement with the high school. It was a football fatality. So through some partnerships with phenomenal organizations like the Corey Stringer Institute and the National Heat Safety Coalition, we are starting to explore some of these additional use cases. And I think that the athletic one is a very interesting challenge that we see at the professional level all the way down to the high school level. So I think to the extent we can nail that deployment, kind of use case where obviously if it takes, 3 hours to set up and all those types of things, we're not going to get the time of day. But if we can make it very simple, effective, intuitive for users, I think there is something there. So a little bit of a spoiler, but yes, we're having active conversations with some groups in the space, and we do think there's a use case there for athletic utilization.
I can easily see the use case for it. Yeah, especially how many kids in this state play high school football and they got to practice starting in August. So I can easily see that. So maybe you can walk us through, Zach, as far as what's going on right now in the whole sort of symmetry of climate change. I mean, there's obviously, not to say you wouldn't talk about whether you believe it or not, but I'm just saying patterns are shifting, and areas are getting hotter than they used to be in the past. So I'm curious. I mean, are you seeing? Is this idea that you have, is it being well received? Because I mean, from my perspective, I can see it being well received. But also I drink the Kool-Aid. I understand that risk mitigation and things are getting hot, not just here, but all around the country and the world. I'm just kind of curious. Have you seen that this message being resonating based upon what we're dealing with, all not as just a country, but as a planet?
Yeah, I would say, whatever side of the aisle you're on, or whether you're straddling it, I mean, put people first. I think ultimately that's what it is for our company. Is I think people are the most important aspect, and we really need to work together on some of these challenges. So, like you said, regardless of the origins, whether it's natural or human induced, et cetera, you could debate on that all day. But generally speaking, the world is getting hotter, and that has an effect on our human species, and we need to do something about it. So, as much as I'd like to say I have revolutionary technology that could reverse, some of the global temperatures we're seeing, I don't, but I do think we have technology that can help individuals better understand their environment, their physiology, and allow them to work smarter in some of these conditions. So yeah, I think it's an interesting, confluence of political action and movement. I know that the Biden administration had released some recommendations for some new national heat stress standards. So a lot of companies are a little bit more willing to hear, our pitch and our conversation when they know that they're going to be regulated in the coming years. So, whether you're a big believer in government regulation or kind of free market, generally speaking, confluence of political action and acute need with, again, I think it's Google heat stress fatality, right? It seems almost every week you're seeing, folks die. So I think that generally speaking, the message is resonating, whether it's due to fear of political or regulatory action, or just a desire to really make sure that, again, that enterprise's most important asset is taken care of. So I believe in people. I think they'll do the right thing, but I guess a little bit of policy to help coax maybe some reticent folks to make the right decision is never a bad thing.
Never a bad thing. So we got another question in. This is from Eric. With HIPAA in mind, is the data received able to be viewed by both medical and non-medical personnel?
That is a great question, Eric. So what I would first say is that our Safeguard platform leverages HIPAA compliant services. So we are a HIPAA compliant solution. Having said that, we generally draw the line in saying that Safeguard is not a diagnostic system. It is not my job to say that, Brian has AFib by looking at his data from our system. We really view it as this intelligent guardian, kind of raise the virtual red flag that something is anomalous, right? Person's core temp seems higher than usual. Person's heart rate seems higher than it should be, for their age and fitness level and for their activity level. If someone's heart rate's 170 on the job and they're not moving a lot and they're not outdoors and working, that's concerning, right? So you're seeing some leaders like Apple that have some of these notifications. I'll call out the Apple Watch, right? It is not a medical device at this point. It is a health and wellness device. So we've really followed some of the leadership of some of these large companies and really primarily focused on being that safety solution. But to answer your question directly, the data could be accessible to whomever needs to see it, whether that's the person, assuming the person is willing to share the data openly. That's a decision they can make. They have to consciously opt in and start a monitoring session. Could be shared with their employer. They can choose to share their data with whomever they'd like, whether that's a physician, whether that's a lawyer, whether that's the union president. It starts at the user level, really from that buy-in and getting their advocacy and willingness to share their data. So yes, could be viewed by non-medical personnel or medical personnel. And we really try to make it as easy as possible so that, an industry layman who may not have an MD or a PhD in physiology can be equipped to better understand human physiological data and help make proactive decisions as it pertains to the health and safety of their staff.
Good. Thank you. Thank you for the question, Eric. Zach, here's a question I've got thinking about you in your operations. Obviously, you seem like a pretty smart guy. You do biochemical and chemistry, and you're probably hiring a bunch in order for your company to grow. You're probably needing some tech people and a lot of science people to do your job. Now, in the construction world, one of the things that we see is a lot of demand, but not enough labor. I'm curious from your perspective, and this is gonna be a two-parter. One, do you see in the marketplace enough qualified people that you can hire, or to that point, do you have to go outside and sponsor green cards if you're willing to talk about that? At least that's the first question. Is the labor pool sufficient to meet your needs?
That's a great question. Generally, we've been hiring onesie twosie type of applications. So for us, at an early stage company like VigiLife, a lot of it's kind of relationship driven where, hey, I met this person in grad school and they're looking for a job. And I guess we've been relatively successful in gathering the expertise that's needed. I will say we're fishing from a relatively small pool on this nexus of human performance and physiology and safety and artificial intelligence and software engineering. So there's not a ton of people that have the specific expertise.
Exactly. Yeah.
It hasn't really been too much of an issue to date, but as our company continues to grow, good people with this set of expertise don't necessarily grow on trees, as you've said. So if we start to increase our hiring efforts, we do foresee that being a challenge. So generally speaking, we're very open to all folks. Again, we're a people first company, so we actively encourage diversity in thought, background experiences as part of our company, because we feel like building a product for people, we need to really have those diverse perspectives. But it hasn't been too much of an issue to date, I would say.
All right. Well, so hopefully that's the issue. Let's maybe put on your thinking cap. You seem like a smart guy, but not only just for you, but other firms in your peers, maybe larger firms. Do you think that the current immigration system is sufficient to meet your needs? In the sense by that, do you think reforms are needed? If you're going to find talent, you have to go outside and get it.
That too is a very good question, and I would say may not be within my wheelhouse. But what I would say is that I think immigration policies, whether they're skilled workers and I hate the term unskilled workers, but workers that may be more focused on STEM and having advanced degrees, or folks that may be more blue collar and work with their hands, is how I would describe it. I think our country certainly could probably do a better job making that as accessible as possible. I mean, it's no secret that America was founded on immigration, my family included. Yep. So I think trying to allow that process to not be as lengthy, to really without compromising national security, allow the best and brightest minds to be able to work on some of the most challenging problems. Yeah. And as it pertains to the health and safety of the entire world, I would argue that's a pretty challenging problem, especially in light of, as you said, climate change among other challenges. So I definitely think there's room for improvement. I will say for a small company like us, things like green card sponsorship, those can be fairly onerous, which does make it a challenge to attract capital. Yeah.
No. Yeah, I think because your industry is not immune to, Peter Zion's one of my favorite, political economists, and he's really good as far as saying, demography is destiny. And you look at the bigger picture, you declining birth rates. You still have, like in the construction world, there's plenty of projects out there but there's not enough subs, and subs don't have enough people. And as we were talking, having this conversation, I think a big reason, and I tell this people, is like, you think about why can't we find people to do this job? We more pushback skills, in the trades in the high school. That's true. It's a difficult job. It's outdoors. It's hot. It is dangerous. You're more statistically, you're more likely to die on a construction job site than in law enforcement. And so I always push back, well, why do you think people don't want to do this? Because it's difficult. And, there are people out there who really like to have those jobs, and immigration has always been a source for, construction, whether legal or not illegal, I'll let you figure out yourself. But that's where a lot of people come to do these jobs. And I think the same thing is that we talk about we don't have enough people doing the trades. Well, I definitely think we as a country fall short on the STEM. And I think we're showing it. I mean, people want to study, accounting and finance, by God love them, in sales, but, biochemistry is kind of hard, and if you're good at it, you can do pretty well at it. So, but that's just my little soapbox I'm always trying to get on.
No, absolutely. I think you see generally, not to compare generations across each other, but doing hard things is never fun. And I think we are on a shortage of folks, again, if they're working with their hands or getting a PhD in a very difficult degree with aspirations to provide a positive impact on the world. It's a challenge to gain to really attract the talent that you need for any enterprise, it seems.
Yeah. So another topic that's kind of hot and heavy, and I think your company is even leveraging it, is the fear of artificial intelligence taking over industries and taking over people's jobs. Would you talk about A, how your company uses AI, and then B, how do you envision you'll probably be using it going forward, and C, should we be scared of it or should we embrace it?
Well, that's a great question and a pun intended hot topic.
Yeah.
So yeah, artificial intelligence, I would say we're relatively early in our journey here at VigiLife with our Safeguard platform. Safeguard today is really good at measuring human physiology as it pertains to the environment that's around. So at this point, we're trying to generate a corpus of data that allows us to get more personalized and predictive. As I like to say, a lot of existing systems, if they exist at all, are very impersonal and reactive. That is to say, we wait until it's too late, until someone has passed out. We wait until someone has, lung disease, and then there's a class action lawsuit. So where I potentially see the value of things like artificial intelligence is to let machinery, to let AI do what it's good at, which is process large, corpuses of data. And that's what we're producing, and to do that in a privacy preserving way. So for our company specifically, whether it's in real time to use some sort of predictive model to forecast out someone's core body temperature based on current exertion, or to analyze a cohort of individuals and say that this group is at risk of chronic kidney disease at a 68% greater likelihood than this group based on the data that we've collected and reviewing available literature. I know that's one of the challenges that Chat GPT is a hot topic right now, is how you actually comb through and understand things like research papers and literature that have been produced. So third part of your question there, I would say, should we fear it? Should we not? I think AI is a tool. And I think naturally, anytime there's a new tool that has revolutionary capability, there are a fair amount of individuals that will be reticent, will be scared, will be used whatever adjective or noun you want to use to describe that. But I think the reality is that AI is here. Many of you are probably using it on a daily basis and may not even be aware of it. So yeah, again, I think if you're mindful of where it excels, its limitations, I certainly don't think there's really going to be a limit on human creativity. There's been some interesting studies of asking artificial intelligence to write scripts and books and those types of things. Yeah. But I think I saw an article that even talked about somebody was trying to feed Chat GPT and say, hey, make me a business that's going to make X amount of dollars by X date. And unfortunately, it failed, or maybe fortunately, it failed miserably, right? So, entrepreneurship, new ideas, jobs to be done theory. I think there's a lot of room for human creativity. And I would not be scared of AI for those that may be worried about replication of their jobs, especially in the construction or real estate industry. The moment we see robots building complete buildings, that's great, but I think we're a long ways away from there. So I would ask myself, how can I use AI to be more efficient, more productive, more safe, and allow me to maybe spend less time at the job? As I think on behalf of every American, I think we'd all would like to have maybe a bit more leisure time.
Boy, Zach, that's a phenomenal answer, because I'm a big believer, and I listen to like a lot of podcasts. One of my favorite is like Pivot with Scott Galloway and Kara Swisher. And Scott Galloway he made a great comment, like, either get in front of the technology and learn to use it, or you get run over by it. And never has a technology ever been released and goes back into the bottle. I mean, I'm sure people were complaining about the horse and buggy manufacturer were complaining about the combustible car when it came out, and I'm sure accountants were complaining about Excel when it first came out. But everybody you adapt, and it might replace jobs, sure, but also might create jobs as well. And to your point, what I do with my content marketing, one of the things I do is a newsletter. It goes out every 2 weeks called Risk It All. And for the longest time, I'm a pretty good writer, but I'm not proficient. I can't just sit there and knock it out. It might take me, big parts of a weekend to get something knocked out. Well, the one I did today, as an example, I talked about how, football and lessons from football apply to enterprise risk management. And so I went to Chat GPT and I said, write me a 2-page article on this. Pop. Now I didn't take that thing and then copy and paste. No, you take it. For me, it's easier to edit than it is to create. Mm-hmm. But I took that with Chat GPT. I like that. Move that. Insert this. Change it around. But this made that whole process more efficient and gave me more time to do other things. So I completely agree with you, Zach. It's not something to be feared, but something to get ahead of and learn it. So,
and that's the same approach we have with Safeguard as well, is that we're not here to replace a health and safety director and our industrial hygienist, but we're here to help them do their job more efficiently and more cost effectively. Because let's be honest, safety alone, health and safety solutions, when you're trying to sell that to executive leadership, I've talked to a lot of organizations. They say, oh, health and safety is our number one priority, but when push comes to shove, and budgeting season's there, a lot of times it's really focused on that production operations aspect. So really being able to marry health and safety solutions with productivity, I think is the sweet spot. And we've demonstrated that to be the case. A lot of folks think if you increase your health and safety posture, reduce your risk profile, you're going to be slower as an organization, more policy, more procedure, et cetera. And the one area where we've seen that we've been able to achieve both productivity and health and safety kind of compliance is really that intersection of technology. So to your point, really pulling those two together, it opens up some new opportunities.
Awesome. So we're mindful of the time here as we're getting towards the end. And again, if you have any questions for Zach, please go ahead and put it in the bottom right-hand corner where you see add a comment next to my photo. So Zach, obviously, being a business owner takes a lot of time, but what do you do when you're not working?
Yeah, well, I do work a lot, but still generally, when I get home, I try to shut down the phone and the laptop. I'm a family man first and foremost. If you go to my LinkedIn, it says husband and father before it says CEO. And that's true for me and for our entire team. We are a people first company, so very much focused on my family. So we enjoy a lot of outdoor activities. We love water sports. I can still flip a wakeboard for those of you that know wakeboarding to this day. Despite it getting more difficult every year. So love golf, love camping. Okay. I'm actually coaching 2 or 3 of my children's teams right now for soccer and baseball. So generally speaking, what time is left after VigiLife or when I prioritize my family first plus VigiLife, there's very little time, but also enjoy cooking, personal finances, et cetera. So go ahead.
No, from a personal finance, I'm curious, are there any books, authors that you follow, podcasts specifically in that field?
Yeah, I really enjoy Planet Money. I think it's a pretty easy listen, and my commute's about 20 minutes, and their episode size that length. So I enjoy this podcast. Freakonomics, some of those types of podcasts are really enjoyable. As far as books go, I'm a big value investor. One of my sons is actually named Benjamin after Benjamin Graham.
Yes,
a lot of people don't know the name Benjamin Graham, but they know Warren Buffett, and Warren Buffett is very forthcoming that Benjamin Graham was his mentor. So that actually kind of that personal finance really excited my journey into entrepreneurship through the MBA. So my MBA was focused on entrepreneurship and finance, which as much as I'd love to say the best technology wins, that's often not the case, right? There's this whole other side of business of getting capital and taking risk and managing, et cetera. So I've been able to intermingle my personal interest and professional interest, and thus far it's worked very well.
So if you're a value investor, which is not necessarily, if you have the guts and the long-term ability to do it, it could be a very smart play, being a contrarian. Without giving out stock names, any sectors or areas that you're specifically kind of looking at, you find appetizing?
That's a great question. I'll say I wasn't expecting an answer on potential industries or stocks to target. I will say that I was in on GameStop a year or two before it was cool, but unfortunately sold too quick for those of you that are familiar with that saga. But I think that there are some industries that have been particularly beaten down. I think the energy industry is one. I still think it hasn't fully recovered. I think there's a lot of reform opportunity in healthcare. So of course that could be a very volatile market, but there may be some opportunities. And then I still think there are a lot of companies that were beaten down, the stock prices were beaten down during COVID that have, if you dig into their balance sheets, that have very, very healthy companies, generally speaking, but they have not necessarily returned to pre-pandemic levels. So a lot of kind of consumer cyclical type companies are some of the groups I'm watching.
All right, very good. Appreciate that. Hey, Zach, greatly appreciate your time. Greatly appreciate your input, your insights. Again, I think there's definitely a need out there for this product. I definitely can see the connection of the dots from, definitely the construction world, from their employees' health and safety. But I can definitely see the benefit of this be leveraged from an underwriting perspective in the insurance world. So I wish you best of luck. I look forward to seeing more stories about you pairing up with the construction firms. And once again, thank you much for your time, sir. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Brian. And yeah, if I could have the closing word here, I would just say, people matter. And I would ask the audience today are you putting your best foot forward with respect to protecting and enriching the lives of those at risk? Your employees rely on you to help take care of them as they go to work every day. And those employees often have, loved ones and families that are relying on them as well. So it was a pleasure to be here. I'm excited with any conversations that may pop up, whether you're a potential user of our platform, or potential partner, or just an advocate of bringing life-saving solutions to those that need it most. So thank you again for your leadership, Brian. Thank you for the opportunity today.
My pleasure, Zach. Thank you so much. So everybody, it's been another episode of Risk On and Risk Off. And I think, as we see, one of our primary themes here is the concept of risk mitigation. Obviously with strong emphasis in construction real estate, but this can go across the board to anything, parts of life. Again, heat dome, we're all tired of it. We're all tired of hearing the story, but that is sort of the future. If you look at the average temperatures going in this country, they're up and to the right. So not seeing that dramatically change anytime soon. So what is it that we can do to protect ourselves and our employees, to reduce the exposure from heat, also, not just heat, but also maybe extreme cold temperatures as well, is beneficial. And so the concept of, hope is not a plan, and sticking your head in the sand like an ostrich doesn't, take the peril and move it away. So the question is making informed decisions based upon new technologies or data that allows you to help reduce exposures or risk. I do think what Zach and his team at VigiLife are bringing something to the table. It's timely, it's beneficial, and having, looking outside my window and the very brown grass rather than green that I'm looking at, and knowing it's 100-degree temperature and will be all next week. There's a lot of people out there who work hard and they're exposed. And so anything can be done to bring technology to help reduce that exposure or risk is beneficial. And I'm curious to see the future of this firm. So as always, guys, I hope you enjoyed this. We find it beneficial. These episodes are made available 5 days later on my YouTube channel. You can also subscribe specifically to the playlist, which has all of these prior episodes. If there's a certain topic or individual you'd like to have this be on the show, please let me know or send me a note. You can also find the links to these videos once I post them on YouTube and Substack. Until next time, guys.